Hey, how are you today? This is Josh Patrick, and you're at Cracking the Cash Flow Code. And my guest today is Michael Lee, and he has a company called Reconcile, which is a bookkeeping and rent a CFO practice. And we're going to get into why I think that's a really good idea for people to think about. And so you don't have to listen to me just wander on and talk aimlessly. We'll bring Michael on. Hey, Michael, how are you today?
Good. How you doing, Patrick?
I'm doing well. So, you have a company that does outsourced bookkeeping and outsourced CFO services. Is that correct?
Yeah. We've started about 7.5 years ago, and from Burlington, Vermont, and had serving hundreds of small businesses across the U.S.
So, why do you think people should do outsourced CFO? I know it's a stupid question, but I'm going to ask it anyhow.
I don't think it's a stupid question at all. Most business owners, they don't go into business because they're excited about accounting or they're excited about finance. That's not why most people wake up, unless you're an accountant or in finance. You start a business because you're passionate about the service or product you're trying to offer the world. So that's where you should be focusing your time. And every hour you spend on your accounting and finance needs, you could be in front of a customer instead, selling your product or service. So I tell small business owners, look, focus in the areas of your strength, which is selling your product or service, and let the experts that know accounting and finance take care of your back office needs.
And what's different from you versus the other guys out there that do similar stuff?
That's a good question. So, Reconcile's a brand where I'm not trying to sell Michael Lee as a service or Michael Lee as a brand. It's really Reconciled. I've got a team of 50 plus employees scattered across the US working remotely and serving hundreds of small business customers in the US. We really focus on some core areas. One is your bookkeeping back office needs. We specialize in the QuickBooks Online environment. And so we actually take over your QuickBooks Online instance and integrate best in class apps to take care of your other back office and accounting needs. And then we are real human beings. So we're not trying to replace humans and interaction with the small business owner with robots or software. We actually are trying to humanize the work we're doing and be a trusted advisor to all of our small business customers.
So, when you work remotely with somebody, what does that look like? Because that's just something that, when I talk to a lot of small business owners, I say, you don't need to have a bookkeeper in house. And they kind of always go, oh man, I really do need a bookkeeper in house and I need someone right next door. And because I need to talk to them, I need it. How do you guys get past that?
Yeah, so we really digitized the whole experience, right? It's 2023, and even when we started in 2016, um, digitizing and doing remote accounting work was still a fairly new concept for most small business owners, like you just said. And so most are used to their bookkeeper coming to their office, being attended to them full time, being able to be on call. The problem with that is that you carry this heavy burden then of a full time employee sitting in an office. And frankly, for most small businesses, they don't have enough work to justify paying a full time employee, but they are for some reason. Remote work and digitizing the experience allows them to save significantly on the fixed burden of having a full-time employee, and now you've got a fractional cost to that, and then you have real-time access to that person digitally, either through email communication, through video communication, and through text messaging. And so we actually digitize that whole experience. We walk through the manual processes of our small business clients, and then we work on digitizing that process to them, getting physical documents into digital documentation, being able to start automating a lot of the work that's done from a bookkeeping perspective and accounts payable management perspective. That makes up the bulk of the accounting work, anyways. We digitize that process, make sure it's audit trailable, and we give complete transparency and insight to the small business owner so they have control over it and insight over it. So it allows them to not have to worry about anybody having to be in person, but it also gives them access to talent across the world, right? So now you don't have to worry if the part-time bookkeeper I hired gets sick or decides to leave and I have to go find another local part-time bookkeeper. You can literally just on demand work with our service and never have to worry about that issue again.
Cool. So you have 50 employees, is that correct? Is that what I heard you say?
Correct. Correct.
So
Yep.
I'm going to do a little pivot off your off bookkeeping because I have a different question for you,
Yeah, sure.
which is one of my favorites, which is, in my opinion, the hardest skill a business owner ever needs to learn is how to be an effective delegator. And I believe that's the reason almost all small businesses stay small. When I talk to business owners, I ask them how big would they like to get. They often will come up with a number, which requires them to add a significant amount of employees, but they never get there.
Yep.
And the reason they never get there, at least in my opinion, is they're terrible delegators and they refuse to learn that skill. So, how did you learn it?
Yeah, so, one is I I first had to admit, and I think every business owner has to admit to themselves, you are not the best at everything you do. And frankly, I know small business owners believe that in theory, but they act as if they are the best person at every single job that's in their hands, right? So I just had to say, "Hey, look, for every role and everything I do for this business, there's probably only one of these items that I'm probably better than everybody at. Otherwise, every single task and responsibility I have, someone else out there is better. And if I give it to them, they can 10x that responsibility into a return for the business." So as I evaluated the different responsibilities I had as a business owner when I started, I began just splicing out as we grow and get more customers and revenue. The first thing I'm gonna do is hire for these particular roles in this order. So I really defined what those looks like. And for me, it came down to the number one thing I could focus my time on. And it's not gonna be the same for everybody, but for me, it was being a brand ambassador for the business and for being the kind of culture champion for all the employees, right? So that means I'm going to still be involved in recruiting some on some level, still be involved in some big deals, still be the front facing face of the business as a brand. But other than that, I'm going to go out and find a better manager for the bookkeepers. I'm going to go out and find a better HR person, a better internal accountant, a better salesperson. And that's what I did every step of the way is always find smarter and better people than myself. At the crux of it, you have to be willing to admit, though, that you're not as good as you think you are. And frankly, that's actually good. That's actually good to admit and say. And it's better to find smarter people to work for you. And if we think of all the very successful leaders out there, they all hired people smarter than them in specific areas. And they all then ended up focusing on the one area they could provide the maximum value to their business on.
So, I often find that business owners, when they're trying to learn how to delegate, get stuck when somebody makes a mistake. And I'm sure that you, as you were, building out your team, there was often times where people would make mistakes that you might think were really stupid or mistakes that shouldn't have happened or, all that sort of stuff. How did you get past that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I myself have made plenty of mistakes, first of all, and every business owner has. And so we're all human beings, and you're hiring humans. You're not hiring perfect robots. You're not hiring perfect software. You're hiring human beings to become leaders in your organization or to work for you. And so one is I've always encouraged my team, look, if you're not making any mistakes, there's something wrong. You're not trying hard enough. There's something going on. Um, and then secondly is when you make a mistake, one, let's own up to the mistake and let's document why did the mistake happen and what can we learn from it so that we don't do it again. And so that's really the reality of making mistakes. But any business owner has to know being in business and being willing to hire people, unless your business is basically just giving yourself a job, then you're just a solopreneur. You don't really have a business. Like if you're a Uber driver for Uber and or a Lyft driver, like you don't really have a business. You're a 1099 contractor, but you don't really have a real business. You have a job for yourself. So if your goal is not to have anybody, you can do that route. But if your goal is to have people work for you and build a real business, then you have to be willing to factor in the costs of mistakes into your budget. You have to be willing to say, hey, the human beings I hire, I'm going to make a mistake on the hires that I make. I'm going to make the wrong hires. But that's the cost of doing business. And that's the journey you go on as you build your business.
So you said something that was really important there in that that wonderful explanation you just gave, which is what did we learn from the mistakes? I mean, mistakes, nobody wants to make a mistake. But the truth is, I have never learned anything from doing it right. I've only learned when I've done it wrong, made a mistake, and asked myself the great question, which you just said, which is, what did we learn? And if we document what we learned so we don't do it again, that's even a better thing. So the other side that I think that keeps people from becoming good at delegating is the lack of trust in their team members. So you had to develop almost blind trust because you grew pretty rapidly.
Mhm.
How did you go about doing that?
Well, so the first thing I started with, which is very interesting to me, is we're selling a service, right? Bookkeeping and accounting service that generally most people buy locally. We were selling it online remotely to customers across the US. And we're asking these small business customers to hand over the keys to the biggest part of their business, the most important part, which is their finances. And to do that over a 30, 45-minute video call and to trust us as a brand and as a service and to trust me in the beginning, right? So I first had to figure out, how do you sell this? How do I sell something that's so trusted and is so sensitive that somebody would literally give me the keys to their kingdom, quote unquote kingdom, over a short 30-minute video call? They've never met me physically, they've never had a drink with me. What do I do? And so I focused on communicating transparency and authentically communicating what I was trying to build in this brand and inviting customers and potential customers to come join me on this journey. I did that on social media. I did that on our website. I did on everything I communicated was, hey, this is me. I'm Michael. This is what I do. This is my hope and dream for Reconciled. I want to invite you to come join me. I want to work with you. So I had to start with, how do I build trust with customers? Once the customers started coming in, then I said, okay, now, how do I find people that can resonate and communicate and be ambassadors of the same trust that I just sold? And that was a matter of getting to know the early employees, making sure they really fit the culture that I was trying to build, and that I could see myself building a relationship with them myself, a trusted relationship myself. As that business grew, we had to learn how to do that rapidly with remote employees. Most of the employees, if not all, I've never met in person. I've only done a video call just like we are right now for this podcast. And so that's a matter of seeing, do they resonate with the values of the culture that you're trying to build, and putting that out there in the interviewing process as people apply to their job. So that was all part of the process. It started with us figuring out, how do we get the trust of the customer? And then we take that same concept and go towards, how now do we earn and figure out that the employees we're hiring are trustworthy people.
Yeah, one of the Brene Brown, I'm a big fan of Brene Brown.
Yeah.
And one of her sayings, which I think is really, really true when it comes to learning how to be a good delegator, is realizing that we're all doing the best we can. I've never had, well, I can't say never, 'cause I had a couple hundred employees work for me over the years, but it's rare that I ever had an employee who didn't want to do the best job they could. And my experience is I made it hard for them. And because of that, they couldn't. So it was really my fault, not their fault, when I wasn't getting what I wanted or having the trusted relationship I wanted. That was a really hard lesson for me to learn, anyhow.
I bet it was a good lesson for you to learn. Yeah, and I agree with you. Many of the failures of employees that haven't done well here, or weren't able to succeed, is because we didn't set them up for success correctly. We didn't give them access to the right tools, the right mentoring, the right coaching, or set up the right expectations for them to succeed. And so the reality is like, just like, raising kids, I got 3 kids of my own. I've got to create the environment that they can live in and succeed. If I create an environment with no expectations, no rules, no future, no, it's not safe, then the outcome is something that I shouldn't be surprised by when they fail, or they aren't contributing members of society, or they get into trouble. So the same thing with employees. I've got to create an environment where they thrive, where they get the training they need. They know the expectations of their jobs. They know whether or not they are meeting those expectations, and they know where to go to get the support they need. If I don't create those environments, then it's more on me than on them, at the end of the day of their success.
Yeah, so you also mentioned something a few minutes ago, which I think is really interesting, which was your culture. So, do you have articulated values in your company, or is it just we have a culture and we all know what it is?
No, yeah, we actually have a culture document that's public on our website, and so everybody that comes to our website to apply for a job, they can see this two-page culture document. It outlines our vision, mission, our values, and what we call our family or team rules. And so one example is one of the rules we have is always be learning, right? We want individuals who constantly are always learning, whether in life or at their job role. So the other day at our staff meeting, all hands staff meeting that's all virtual, we broke out into breakout rooms and we shared, what are you learning this past month? What are you focused on in learning, whether it's personal or related to your job? Share that rule or that behavior is something we're trying to continue to cultivate in people, and we all need reminders of it, right? That we're always learning, whether we know it or not. We are always learning. It's a matter of, are you challenging yourself in that learning, or are you being lazy and focusing on something that you already know a lot about, right? So with our job as bookkeepers, and because we're using the latest technology, our team is always learning new software, always learning about new industries, always learning the new accounting rules. And so we need individuals that are not only practicing but excited about learning all the time. So that's an example, and we put it out there right on our website.
So, do you have a method for tracking what people are learning?
We don't have a method for tracking that, except for we do have it as a regular part of our sharing when we check in with one another in our check-ins.
Cool, cool. So
Yeah.
so you're doing what I like to see people do is that you have a value, and then you have a definition for what that value means. Because if I say we're a learning organization, and you don't define what a learning
No.
organization means, nobody has any idea what you're really talking about.
Yeah, culture, I learned, a few years ago, culture really is a defined set of behaviors, right? So, for example, I tell people, if I wanna create a culture at home that is a culture of cleanliness, well, what do I have to teach my kids? I say to my kids, "Every morning when you get up, make your bed." I don't care how you feel. I don't care if you're sick. I don't care if you're excited. I don't care if you have to rush out the door. You wake up, you make your bed. When you're done with dinner, you take your plate, you go to the kitchen, you put it in the dishwasher. Why am I doing that? Do I explain to them why? Yes, it's because having a clean place represents who you are inside, right? It represents the culture we're trying to build at the house. But ultimately, as a kid, they can't hear that. They just need to know the behavior, right? When the behavior is practice, 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 eventually they realize, oh, I did these actions. I have a clean room. I have a clean kitchen. I have a clean dining room. Same thing at your workplace. So we talk about always be learning, and then we in our actual rules explain, what does this mean? What does it look like to always be learning? What are the expectations? And we actually tie it to a requirement. So every employee at Reconciled, they have to have at least an hour or more of learning every month. That's part of their job, right? And then they have to show, okay, I spent this month doing X, learning X, and then we make sure that they have that time, available to make sure they meet those requirements.
Yeah. So, Michael, I only have a couple minutes left, or we only have a couple minutes left,
Yeah.
and I'm going to pivot again, which is I have this wonderful habit of doing on this show. And I'd like to talk for a little bit about sales growth versus profit growth. And I just want to, preface this section with my pet peeve. Every person online, every business growth consultant I ever talk about, they always seem to talk about, I'm going to 10x your sales, or I'm going to 2x your sales, or whatever I'm going to do to your sales. But I learned over the years that growing sales is not necessarily a recipe for success. For me, it was almost a recipe for disaster because we outgrew our cash availability when we were growing, and I never knew it because I didn't realize that principal payments do not show up on your P&L. I learned
Exactly.
that. I learned that the hard way. So, can you just talk for a second between, I might add some stuff here, but it seems to me that it's a whole lot easier to double your profits than double your sales.
Yeah, and I think there's the reality for most people running small businesses is the idea of sales makes sense to them, right? Increasing revenue, increasing sales makes sense to them because they just go out, they sell some more, and they come back. It doesn't require a lot of analysis. It doesn't require a lot of understanding of finance or accounting. It's let's go out. Now the problem is that depending on how you sell and at what price you sell and how fast, it can cost you, and it can cost you significantly. You can be losing money on those sales. To double your sales, did you give a lot of significant discounts out of the sales, and you're actually losing more money on the second half that you're doubling versus the first half of sales that you've done. So profit increasing and doubling profits is something that actually requires thought, right? Because you have to think through, hey, how do we increase prices so that when we sell next, we actually make more money per unit sale? Or let's take a look at our expenses right now and see if there are fixed costs that we actually can do away with to decrease our fixed costs. Or let's do an analysis of our variable costs and see if there's a way to decrease cost of labor, cost of goods sold, so that every unit or every service hour we sell, it actually is cheaper to deliver on. That requires some level of accounting and finance understanding or discipline that you would have to practice regularly, which we know most business owners and frankly most human beings aren't great at. So that's honestly why I think most people out there are so focused on increasing sales, and it actually gets most of the news, right? Most of the magazines, news stories, awards are all about increasing sales. You don't see a Inc. 5000 award for increasing profits. It doesn't exist, right? There's no award for the fastest profit increases of 5,000 companies. It's all revenue and sales driven. So you could be a losing money company on the brink of bankruptcy and you'd still make the Inc. 5000. So that's a big difference is where are the accolades and awards? It's on sales and revenue increase, and that's why I think there's such a focus on it.
And you brought up something which was really interesting. I'm just going to, we'll probably have to end pretty close to here. But what you were talking about is increasing sales is a tactical activity. And every business owner is at least reasonably good at tactical stuff
Mhm.
because they wouldn't get their business started if they weren't. But when you're increasing profits, that's all strategic activities. If I'm going to do pricing, it's strategic. If I'm going to do process control, that's strategic. If I'm going to implement different systems, that's strategic. None of that is stuff that's not business owners are naturally good at.
Mhm.
And it's a skill they need to learn to do that. Now, you can get somebody like you or somebody like me that knows how to do this and say, I want some help in increasing my profits and not my sales. So, folks listening to this show, next time you talk to your advisor, ask them how you're going to double your profits. And if they don't have a good answer, find a new advisor because their job is to help you make more money, not do more business. Although that might
That's
be
great.
part of the equation.
That's great. That's great advice, Josh.
So, so Michael, this has been really a pleasure. And unfortunately, we're out of time. You've got a really interesting company. I spent some time looking at your website, and I thought it was pretty cool. I love the services that you're offering. So, if somebody wants to find you, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, reconcile.com, easy way to see more about us. And then you can find me on LinkedIn, Michael Lee. I have the little fire emoji in front of my name on LinkedIn. And I reach out to everybody that reaches out to me. So as long as you're not trying to solicit me to sell me something, I'm happy to help answer any questions about finance, accounting, entrepreneurship, whatever. I'm always there to help.
Cool. I've got two things I want you to do, and the first one I've asked you to do 429 or 430 times, which is go to wherever you're listening to this podcast and please, 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 please give us an honest rating and review. It really helps with people finding the show. And folks tell me they like the show. Been doing it for about 8.5 years now. And the second thing is the thing that I've noticed with private business owners is about 95% of the businesses Of the 8 million in the country, there's only 400,000 that have more than 50 employees. 7.4 million businesses have less than 50 employees,
Mhm.
and 7 million have less than 25 employees. You are going to have a really hard time selling your business and riding off into the sunset with your business as your entire asset. So we've developed a program called the Financial Freedom Accelerator, which first tells you where you stand on the road to reaching financial independence. And like with most business owners, we find out you're not there. We will help you develop a strategy that will get you to financial independence in a way that works for you. Really easy to find out more about it. Just go to www.sustainablebusiness.co/freedom. That's www.sustainablebusiness.co/freedom. Read about the Financial Freedom Accelerator. And if you're interested, set a time for talk to me and see if you qualify for it. So this is Josh Patrick, and we're with Michael Lee. You're at Cracking the Cash Flow Code. Thanks a lot for stopping by. I hope to see you back here really soon.